Everyone. So I'm posting this video a day late because real life happened and I fell off a horse this weekend, which just kind of derailed everything. But I am really excited to share this interview with you. This is an interview with Olivia Pechstein, also known as Hello My Livia on Instagram. Olivia grew up competing in local hunter and equitation shows. She stepped away to go to college and start her career. After finding her way back to the barn as an adult, she found her love for the jumper ring and competed up to the meter 15 classes with her perfect gelding, Frankie. In 2021, she welcomed her daughter, and barn life since then has gone through a few different iterations as she learns to balance early motherhood and giving Frankie everything he deserves. This interview is so good. There's so much good stuff in here. I really loved my chat with Olivia, and I hope you get as much out of it as I did. And without further ado, let's hear from Olivia.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi there.
How
Thanks
are
for
you?
having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I feel like you're like such a fun person to talk to, and I think this is going to be a really great conversation. So, I'm hoping you can start by just kind of telling us, like, kind of from the beginning, what you like. Did you always want kids, or like we'll just jump right into the meat of it? Or was this kind of something that evolved with time for you, or and then, like, did you always know you wanted to do horses and kids at the same time, or
Definitely. Okay, we are jumping in the
yeah,
deep end.
get right in there.
Awesome, love it. Yes, short version, yeah, I always knew I wanted kids. I mean, if you asked me when I was 16, I'd probably say like, I don't know. But like once I kind of reached adulthood, graduated from college, got a job, that I always felt like was going to be in my future. And actually at the time when I graduated college, I wasn't riding. I had stepped away. I grew up riding, but I sold my horse when I was, I think, end of junior year of high school to focus on getting ready for college. Uh, Went through all 4 years. I hopped on a horse a few times here and there, but not really. And then I got my first job. I made some friends. I met my now husband. And I hadn't really been in the saddle at all. And it was actually my now husband who was listening to me complain one night about how hard it is to make friends and how I didn't know anyone and meeting people as an adult is so hard. And he said, well, you told me you used to horseback ride. What if you tried that? What if you took a few lessons? Maybe you could meet people that way. I was like, sounds like a great idea. And I just tripped and fell right back into the horse world. But even then, I knew that someday I was going to want to get married and have kids and have a family. That never left my mind. And I think I went pretty hard for a couple years there, competing beyond what I financially should have. Um, I overextended. I don't regret a single moment of it. I'm really glad I did. But I think part of it was because I knew there was going to be an end date to that level of time and money that I would be able to commit to it. Because I knew at some point I was going to say, it's time for a different chapter, and the balance is going to shift. So I spent most of my 20s going to shows as often as I could afford, traveling to go to these different shows. I went to Florida, I went to Ohio, Lake Placid, more than I ever dreamed of, honestly. And I'm so glad I did, because now, having a young child and another on the way, that balance is obviously very, very different. But I'm able to be very happy with it, knowing that I achieved everything and more that I set out to do. I'm going to achieve more again in the future when that balance shifts back that way. But for now, I'm really happy with where the balance is right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it seems like you kind of were able to, yeah, like it kind of was able to develop in a way that worked well for your kind of timeline anyway. Like it almost seems like horses fit into your like family life more so even than maybe the other way around, if that makes sense. At the beginning, maybe. Like,
Um, I feel like it's fit in different ways in at different points. So I'd say from about the age of like 23 to like 28, life fit into my horse life was my life. The horse world, the barn. I mean, like I had a full-time job, obviously. But like everything I did was planned around how do I afford the time and money to train and compete the way I want to. So like I got a flex schedule at work so that I could get to the barn more often and travel and compete. I arranged the ability to work remotely so I could work from horse shows. So like all of my work life was all in service of my horse life. And then my personal life, I mean, my personal life was the barn. My friends were my barn friends. My now husband is allergic to horses, but he had his own hobbies to keep him busy, thankfully, and he's always been very supportive from a distance. But then, it kept going after we got married. Even it's not like getting married really changed that. The first year we were married, like we didn't see each other. We were busy. We were doing stuff. We'd like hang out on the weekends sometimes. But once honestly, it was 2020 when the pandemic hit. That was kind of the catalyst for a bunch of big changes, but those changes were on the way for us anyway. So we had already decided to move to about an hour away from where we were. I was in a job that I knew I was going to leave because it just was not a good situation for me. I was finishing up my MBA, and the time just felt right for us to start a family. So COVID kind of fast tracked a bunch of stuff because it was like, okay, we got to get out of here. Like, let me finish this program. What else are we going to do besides have a kid? So it was going to happen anyway, but the timing definitely was accelerated. And at that point, since then, my horse life has had to fit into my family life. So that the one that took precedence has shifted over time.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's like, it feels like both are such all-consuming things, right?
Mhm.
Like the horse obsession and also obviously being a parent are both like full-time jobs. And
Oh
so yeah, it makes sense that like one kind of has its moment and then kind of shifts, and the other kind of has its moment, and kind of grappling with that balance can be such a challenge.
Mhm.
Did
Definitely.
you, I'm always so curious about this because I didn't, so I'm curious, did you have any role models or examples of people that had kids and horses, or was that something that was just like,
No. No, I mean, there's lots of adult amateurs that ride with my trainer at my barn that are awesome. And there's a bunch of barn parents, like the parents of the kid, the juniors that ride with my trainer, and I adore them and they're awesome. But seeing another adult with young children balance it, no, I didn't really see that. And the people that I did see kind of at shows that I knew, I didn't know them well, but like I kind of knew them because I would see them at shows. And I would see a few people that had young kids, but it just felt like we were living very different lives. So I couldn't really relate because they're like, oh, if you wanted to make it work, you can just make it work. For their reality, that was true. For the constraints that I have on my schedule and my finances, it wasn't. So it just the whole saying of, oh, if you just try hard enough, you can make it work. I think trying hard is a great thing and you need to try hard, but that's not all it takes. There's a lot more of a support system that I think you need to have to make it work.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it also is like, I always think about even just having horses is such a privilege, like they're, and I think also having kids is such a privilege too,
Mhm.
and yeah, it can be kind of important, I think, to kind of keep that in perspective sometimes, like
Definitely.
um yeah, that we do this because we want to and we're lucky enough that we get to, and that
Mhm.
like sometimes it feels like we can get a little bit carried away with the um yeah, like kind of having that feeling of I don't know if like guilt is the right word, but kind of that feeling of like you're not giving enough to one or the other, or
I think
uh,
because it is such an all-consuming sport, like so many of us, it's I think it's rare for people. I mean, I know it happens, but in my experience, it's rare to see people just go to their lesson once a week and that's it.
yeah.
It's such a consuming hobby because you get so into it. And like I mentioned earlier, my friends were my barn friends.
Mhm.
My happy hour was Friday. Like I'd finish my lesson, I'd bring a bottle of wine, and I'd like sit there with my barn friends and like watch the lesson after mine, and that was happy hour
Yeah,
at the barn. And like
like more
the
of a lifestyle.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So then that gets into then, like, you're now in your second pregnancy. So did you ride while pregnant? Did you have, like, was there a transition out of the barn, or was it kind of like, oh, I'm pregnant now? I like, what did that look like for you in that moment of switching from horses to then parent life?
It's definitely gone back and forth a bunch since having my first. When I got pregnant with my first, I was actually still actively riding and competing. I competed at a show when I was 8 weeks pregnant. I decided to not do the original division I had signed up for because I had recently fallen off, and I was like, maybe let's chill a little. But I entered like the 0.8 meters with my horse who could walk those, and like chucked the reins at him and was like, go, Frankie, go. And he was just like, okay, like he was thrilled. He's like, I don't have to work hard anymore. So I was still competing when I got pregnant with my first, and I fully planned on riding the whole time. Like I was like, I have the safest horse on this planet. Anyone who has met my horse knows that he is like, you can trust him. End of story. Like he's just a good goober. So I was like, he's gonna keep me safe. I'll just keep riding. Like, why not? My body had other ideas. I'm one of those lucky people that gets something called SPD, which is basically where my pelvis tries to rip apart. It's not fun. Don't recommend. 0 out of 10. So I started getting symptoms of that like second trimester. So about 16 weeks, I started having to pull back. I was still lessening. I was taking like 1 or 2 lessons a week. I was still jumping, not big, but I was still staying pretty active. But then my body was telling me like, it's time. Like, this is not like things were hurting, and it was getting harder, like longer and longer to recover after riding. And also my horse, he likes having a job. Not being able to keep him in full work, he was just like, he was getting bored. Like, I mean, he was thrilled. Don't get me wrong. Like, he would happily not have a job and be fully retired and live his best life. But like, he does better when he has something to occupy his time. So at about, it was like 18 weeks, I told my trainer, I said, I think I'm going to have to call it. But I don't want Frankie to sit. I think maybe like, do you have anyone that might be looking for a lease? Because I don't want to send him out somewhere that I don't know. I'd rather him stay here because my trainer, we've got a great relationship. She's a great horsewoman. I knew that I could trust her to keep him in a program that was working for him and keep him healthy and keep eyes on him. And she ended up finding the nicest family ever. They leased him for 1.5 years. So their lease ended when my first was 9 months old,
Okay.
year old. So for the second half of my pregnancy and the first year of my child's life, I didn't really ride. Which I know is a lot longer than a lot of people take, but that's what I needed. Because I was nursing and my kid ate every 2 hours, which meant I could not drive to the barn, ride, and come back. I needed to take her with me. And I couldn't always ensure that there was someone there to watch her. So once she was a little bit older, I could leave her for longer stretches. So I took him back, and I had him back from like April 2022 onwards, and we competed. We went right back out there in the show ring. We went to Loudon Benefit. We went to Tryon. Like, he just got me right back in the ring and packed my butt around. I was so out of shape, but he didn't care because he's perfect. And then we got into the winter, and my kid got a little bit older, and it was like, I can only get to the barn twice a week. And could I have made it keep going? Yes, but it just wasn't working the way I needed it to work for our schedules. So at that point, I made the decision to lease him back out. And so that family, another wonderful family that works with my trainer, they've been amazing. Everyone who's leased him has been just the nicest people. But so we went from not riding for 1.5 years. I took him back and I had this whole big competition season. It was great with my kid in tow. She was about 1.5 years old. It was super fun. And then the reality was, at that point, I had to lease him back out. And he's coming to the end of that lease, actually at the end of this month. And we are looking for a new lease for him because realistically, I am a beached whale. I get winded walking up the stairs. So I cannot keep him in work. So he needs to have a job. So it's gone back and forth, that balance of okay, I need the time to be able to like physically recover and do what I need to do with my kid. Okay, now I'm ready. Let me back at the barn. And it was great. And then the balance shifted again. So I hesitate to say that like, oh, like the act of having my child made the change because it's changed 3 times since having her. And I expect it'll continue to do that.
Do you think those changes like were do you think those moments kind of were difficult for you to make those changes, or do you think you were pretty open to what needed to happen at those
Um,
times?
the first time around, that first lease out when I was like halfway through my first pregnancy, that one was a pretty easy decision just because like physically I was like, I'm done. Like I'm cooked. I want to lay on the couch. So this is fine. It was also like the middle of winter. So it's like I don't even want to go to the barn anyway. It's gross out. The second choice to lease him out after like I had taken him back off lease, we had this great competition season. That one I had a lot harder time with emotionally
Mhm.
because that one felt like a cop out. The
Mhm.
first time felt like, oh, this is the right choice for me physically. I have physical limitations that mean that this is the best choice for my horse. The second time felt like if I just tried harder, I could make this work. But it was putting a lot of stress on my family, just to balance with my husband's work schedule, my work schedule. My daughter was getting old enough to be signed up for like certain activities. So her schedule, even the cost of childcare, being able to get to the barn on a reliable basis, knowing that I had someone to watch my kid, because again, my husband's work schedule is a consideration. He's super amazing and supportive, but if he's at work, he can't take care of our child. So all of those things, even though all of those things are very, very valid reasons, it still felt so much harder because it felt like I could just overcome those if I wanted it more, if I tried harder. And so I struggled with that really hard. And
Mhm.
ultimately, it was 1000% the best choice for me, certainly for my family at the stage that we're in, but also for Frankie, because he got this lease family that has doted on him, that they're out there every day, just loving on him. They have been the most amazing people for him. And if I had kept him to myself, he would have gotten a fraction of my attention, a fraction of the just investment in his well-being. So it definitely was the right choice, but it was a much harder choice the second time around.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely feels like I don't know if you feel this way also, but like kind of that kind of bound by the commitment to your horse sometimes, you know, where you're like, you were here first and like I, want the best for you and therefore I don't know, it's easy to get yourself stuck in this kind of like guilt spiral sometimes for me. Like I feel
Definitely.
like yeah, like if I don't do everything for my horses exactly the way that I did pre-baby, I feel like I'm not doing enough, even though
Mm-hmm.
all my horses are fine and happy and like they don't seem to care, but it's
Right.
all in my own head, And I think to
Absolutely.
kind of get caught up in that, um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not a good feeling though.
Yeah, definitely. I remember thinking like, is he gonna think I don't love him?
Mm.
He does not care. He is fat and happy. Like he's living his best life. He's still, and because I've chosen to do these in-barn leases with my same trainer, he doesn't even have to move stalls. He's not moving turnout. He's with his same buddies, eating the same food. Like his life, the only difference for him is that he's not jumping as big, which he's like, that's fine. So like logically, logically, I know that he's totally fine with this. This is a great situation for him. And I still get to go see him frequently. Emotionally, though, like there's a difference between logical and emotional, right? That emotional side is like my baby. What if he
Totally.
forgets me?
And there's so much emotion in horses, we're so emotionally attached and connected um, and I think that's totally valid also, and I think that's part of the struggle of like, on paper, it's like, well, of course, like, it makes sense to prioritize, your kids and your job and all the things. And then your heart is like, but what about the thing that I love?
Yeah,
Like, what
exactly.
about that horse that loves me too? And it's like, it's such a yeah, that emotional piece I feel like is still valid, even though it's maybe not as easy to kind of wrap your head around sometimes.
Yeah. And that's actually, I think, a really interesting point of like the what about what makes me happy rather than just what needs to happen for my family. And this, I think, is such a hard sport to say that about because it's not like knitting, where I
Mhm.
can say, I love to knit, which is true.
Me
I'm a
too.
millennial, so obviously, I'm into knitting. Um, that can just be like, oh, when baby goes to bed, I can just make some time for knitting. It's not like that. It's not like other hobbies where you can just say, I'm going to make time for myself to do this 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Even if you have horses at home, which I don't, but even if you have horses at home, it's not pop out for 20 minutes. It's a significant time and money investment. So it's not like other things where you can just say, I'm going to take the time to do the thing that makes me happy. It's like, no, I'm going to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and take hours out of my days to do this. And that's a hard sell. Like I get it. And my husband never once said this is too much. I was the one that was like, you know what? For right now, this is too much.
Mhm.
And again, one day that balance will shift back. My kids won't be so little. They won't need me as much. And I'll be able to get the horse roll will be there. And I'll be able to get back to it. But like for now, what about what makes me happy? I need to find other things that make me happy in the meantime, because it's too much right now for the balance that we're able to sustain.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's hard to find other things that yeah, I just feel like you have such a great way of explaining that, and kind of an like optimistic way too. Like I also like to knit,
Yeah,
and
it's fun.
but it definitely does not take the place of horse time, right? Like you're like, this is nice, and like I can sit here and like, oh, look at that progress, and it feels so good. But
Mhm.
it doesn't scratch the same itch in the same way, which is just such an interesting, and yeah, it's just one of those things I think that until you've kind of lived it, it's hard to really have empathy for that too.
Yeah. For Christmas this year, I asked for all hobby related things. I got Legos, I got a crochet kit, I got a knitting kit, I got a like a keyboard so I could learn to play the piano. It's like all things that I can do at home for
Right.
short bursts. Because I was realizing, I was like, I don't have any hobbies. I never, horseback riding was my quote unquote hobby by the strictest definition, but it wasn't a hobby, right? It was my life. So I never had anything else. It was work, barn, and my husband. Yeah, he fit himself in there. So I never developed any other interests, really. Like, I like to read, but I can only read so many pages, which is a lot. But still, at some point, I need to do something with my hands or use my brain in a different way. And so, it's been fun exploring different things. Certainly not the same. It's not. It doesn't replace that all-consuming like. There's a reason they call it the horse bug. It's like a fever, right? And you
Totally.
never recover.
Yeah. And I think we kind of run the risk of, like you're saying, like becoming one dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is true also like when you have an injury or an illness or something that keeps you out of the barn. But definitely for me, like yeah, like pregnancy and like the postpartum period were the longest I think maybe in my entire life I've ever been out of, the horse world. And it's just such a different thing. Like, you think about, yeah, like you're saying, like it's just, you're like, what else do I do? What's my identity outside of
What
this?
do
Who
I
am
like?
I outside of? And I think being a mom is kind of the same, right? Like you run the risk of kind of becoming one dimensional and like being all about being a mom and like
Mhm.
um then when that's gone, then who are you? So in some ways I think we're lucky in that we have two things that feel that way about,
Right.
when the balance does start to shift, like you're talking about, like we can go back to the original obsession and we still have an identity there outside of keeping another human alive. Now we're keeping another animal alive, but yeah, it's such a like an all-consuming um yeah, identity, I think is the best way to
Mhm.
describe that.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. And you've been talking about too, like your husband's super supportive and he's not a horse person. Um, did he help with any of this like decision making, or was he kind of like a sounding board for you, or was that kind of just all you?
Definitely a sounding board. He's he's always trusted my judgment. You know, I'll be totally honest. We have joint accounts. We have since we got married. So it's never been my money that I spend on horses. It's been our money. We don't track whose salary is going towards what. It all goes into the same pool. It all comes out of the same pool. And we have fun money accounts, like, but I feel like that's important to say because like that takes a lot of trust.
Yeah.
That neither of us is going to take advantage of that situation. And I've always been the person that manages our finances. We have different division of labor. That's what works for us. So it takes a lot of trust on his part that I'm not going to completely bankrupt us because I very easily could, right? I could just be like, I'm going to go to all these shows, screw you, figure it out. So it's definitely, he knows and trusts that I'm going to make the decisions that are best for us. And I think he knew that the decision to lease Frankie back out that second time was really hard for me, but he also knew that it came from a place of understanding that this is what our family needs right now. And we talked about it a lot. And he had told me, he said, listen, if you seem to be really upset about the idea of this, if this is not like, you can back out. You don't have to sign the lease. You can keep them. Like, we will make it work. And I so appreciated that he said that because he didn't want me to be unhappy. He wants me to be happy. He's a good guy. I like him a lot.
That's good.
Yeah, works out well. But that didn't change the fact that it was still the right decision. And I think seeing me make that decision, despite being sad about it, it like he knows that he can trust that I'm going to put the needs of our family first. And he does the same thing in other ways. Like it's not me sacrificing everything for our family. It's both of us. And I hate the word sacrificing because it makes it sound such like a negative thing. It's both of us prioritizing. I feel like that's a better word because I feel like when you say, oh, I'm sacrificing for my family, I mean, I'm making decisions based on what we all need, including me, because again, it ended up being the right choice for me as well. I was able to devote my time in different ways. But yeah, he's always been my sounding board to go to say, do you think this is a good idea? How can I do this? I'm not sure how to make this work, and he'll help me figure it out. So like I really wanted to go to Tryon. I had never been, and my trainer was going for a week. And he said, sign up. And I was like, okay, well, like I'll have to bring Lena. I can't be away from her for a whole week. She was about a year and a half. Not even a year and a half. She was like a little over a year. I was like, I can't be away from her for a week. I know, I can't do it. I can't be away from my kid. I don't want to. And he was like, then I'll come. I was like, you'll need to take vacation time. And he was like, I'll use vacation time. So we made a family trip of it.
Wow.
And that meant that like when I got up at 5 a.m. to go to the like get there early for the course walk, usually Lena would wake up when I woke up. He would wake up at 5 a.m. to like give her breakfast, and then once she was done, he would bring her to the barn.
Wow.
And like he videoed all my rounds while she was in the stroller next to him. So when I say he's not a horse person, like he sneezes when he's near the horses, but he also has done so much to like make it possible for me to be able to do this. Which is he's
That's
a really
incredible.
cool guy. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Has your daughter shown any interest in horses yet?
Yes, we're actually, I told her tonight at dinner that we're going to the barn tomorrow to say hi to the horses, and she made a beeline. She's like, I'm gonna get my boots on. I was like, not right now, not right now. We did lead line with her when she was about a year old. She was very overwhelmed by the whole thing. Like that was for me, not for her. But I've been with my trainer for 10 years, and she's awesome. And so she lets us borrow a pony from time to time. So we've done pony rides a bunch. She has her own helmet. She has her little boots. She loves it. She's actually like walk trot cantered in front of me in the saddle with my horse, Frankie. Because I was like, if there's any horse that's going to keep us safe, it's going to be Frankie. So like, I'll sometimes just like have her in front of me if I hop on, and off we'll go. And like Frankie's just like tootling around, loose rein, just like taking care of us. And she loves it. She absolutely loves it. She's a little intimidated riding by herself, she'll walk happily all day long. But like we've tried trotting a few times, and like she's in like this little saddle on the pony, and she's kind of like, no one's holding me. But yeah, she looks forward to going to the barn every time we go.
I'm guessing I maybe know the answer to this, but do you think if she continues to show interest, do you think you'll encourage her to kind of get into horses and maybe competing and as she gets older, or?
Yes, with a caveat that I think I'm going to be priced out of that world by the time I'm old enough to do it, the way things are going. But I think there's so many different ways of doing it these days. My trainer now has this thriving IEA program, where these kids that either don't want to or don't have the means to maybe own or lease are still able to get these incredible competition experiences. And so I think, if she's interested, she wants to go, by all means. If she decides, you know what, this isn't for me, I want to do gymnastics, we'll do gymnastics. If she says, no, I'm a theater kid, great, I'll go to every play. So I kind of want to just sign her up for everything and see what sticks, but I hope she at least enjoys the barn enough to want to come with me when she's older, because I want to get back into it at
Yeah,
some point.
yeah,
So I'd love if she could tag, even if she's not into riding, I'd love it if she could at least enjoy being there together.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And if you had to kind of sum up, if you had any kind of advice or words of wisdom for people that are just maybe trying to navigate this whole situation, maybe, at that crossroads you were at when you were deciding if you were going to lease your horse for the first time or something like that,
Mhm.
what would you say to those people?
Just that nothing's permanent. Just because you're making a decision right now, doesn't mean that that's how it's going to be forever. Um, like I said, I've had Frankie leased out, and I've been actively competing with him and back and forth in the last couple of years. Nothing lasts forever, so even if something is hard, it can still hard and right can coexist.
Mhm.
The right decision is not always the easy one. It doesn't mean that you are giving up. It doesn't mean that you're quitting. It means that your balance is shifting. The life changes. And one thing I like to tell people is your life's going to change whether you have kids or not. No one's the same at 30 as they were at 20. No one's the same at 35 as they were at 25, whether you have kids or not. Regardless of children, like your life is not going to look the same. Your job's going to change. Your relationships are going to change. Where you live, what you do, your perspectives. You are going to be a completely different person. Kids are part of that. If you do have children, and that becomes part of that equation, but it's not the only part of that equation. So I think there's a lot of resistance and fear of change, which I experience. Certainly change is hard. And a lot of that gets kind of pinned on motherhood. And yes, that is a massive catalyst for change. But I think people need the reminder it's not the only catalyst for change. Things would change no matter what. So remembering this is temporary, it's okay, and things are going to change anyway. We don't have that much control over it. So you do the best you can with what you've got at the time. And then you revisit it over time and you see, can things shift back or forwards or differently? And just roll with it.
So beautiful. I love that you said, right, that things can be right and hard. I like that kind of having space for both of those things, that idea of both can be true.
There's been a lot of times where the decisions that my husband and I have made around parenting have been met with the reaction of, oh, that sounds like that's much harder for you. Just an example to give context to that is we've chosen to not put our daughter into daycare. We have a sitter come to our house. And with the way my husband's work schedule is, he's on certain days and off. So we only need someone 2 or 3 days a week, a little bit more right now because he's on night shift. But we opted to not use a daycare. We opted to find in-home care. And that comes with a lot of logistical nightmares. Finding someone, If they quit on me, I got to find someone new. It's a weird schedule because of my husband's work schedule. And so it's harder. And people have said that seems like that's way harder on you than putting in to daycare. And I agree, it is. But for us, it felt like the right decision. It for us and for what we wanted, it was the right decision because it was worth the hard. So that's just one example, but I think there's so many times where someone says, "Oh, that sounds so hard." Yeah, it might be, but it also might be worth the hard. So
Yeah.
I think you can decide
I
that.
think that's something too that like kind of in this like moment in our culture, you know, as a broader culture, we're kind of forgetting that a little bit, that sometimes that like, you know, that instant like dopamine, instant gratification, like sometimes that feels good, but that's not always, doesn't always make that the right decision. Or sometimes the thing that maybe doesn't give you that right away is, I even think about with horses, like a lot of the people that I know that are so madly in love with their horses did not have an instant connection, right? Like that built over time. And sometimes it's worth like putting in that longer, harder work, because the thing that comes later is so much better than the instant easy thing. So
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
so good. Is there anything else that I forgot to ask about or talk about?
Um, Let me review my I don't think I have notes, but um oh, I would love to talk a little bit about like when like training isn't feasible,
Mm.
but like you still want to stay involved. Because that for me, like I'm not riding, right? I've been on my horse maybe 4 times in the last year. Um, but that doesn't mean that I've completely like moved away from the horse. Like I didn't just like leave and never look back. Um, my barn friends that I talked about earlier, how like we did happy hours and like all these things that we did together because we were there 6 days a week together. They're still my friends. One of them just came and babysat my kid for me yesterday because I was in a pinch and needed someone to watch her, and she showed up, like she was here. So and like we still go to shows. I've brought Lena to just the shows nearby to cheer on the team. We go to the barn, and even if we don't ride, we'll brush the horses. Um, so I think it's hard to give up the like active training, competing, feeling like I'm working on me. But for me, it's been important to keep one foot in and keep those ties and keep those relationships and keep just that set, like being able to go and just breathe it in, um, has been really important to me to have that, even if it's not that often, even if it's once a month, just popping by the barn to just experience being there, um, has been really important. Um, and maintaining those ties with my trainer. I've been back and forth in and out of the saddle for 4 years now. I still talk to my trainer regular, like I still call her my trainer. When's the last time I took a lesson? A year ago? 2 years? Like 2 years? I don't know. It's been a while. She's still my trainer. We still have that great relationship, and she's still overseeing my horse's care. And she already knows what I'm looking for in my next horse in down the road. It's not going to be for a couple more years. Certainly, it's not going to be anytime soon. But like I feel like I still have those people and those relationships and that part of my life just in a different way. So
Yeah, that kind of I feel like goes back to the idea of like kind of it's an all-consuming lifestyle, right? Like just because you can't necessarily be involved in the way that you were before doesn't mean that you can't kind of find a way to shape shift and still have some kind of involvement. And I think that's amazing that you're also like you know, involving your daughter and going to the shows and kind of just staying part of the community, because I think also finding a good community at a barn can be one of the more challenging things about the lifestyle for some people. Like, I think some barns have kind of competitive, divisive cultures, and some obviously have, it sounds like you found one that doesn't, and that's incredible. And I think just like once you find those people, like you just don't want to let them go, you know, like they're just
Definitely.
so
I,
good.
I feel so bad. I've heard so many horror stories about people getting caught up in these catty, like just these bad situations where the trainer and the clients is just bad juju. And I've been fortunate enough that I literally found my trainer on Google. I
Wow.
Googled Hunter Jumper Barns near me, and this was one of the, I don't remember if it was the top result, but it was one of the top results. And I've been with her ever since, almost 10 years now, actually coming up on 10 years. Um, but she has very consciously built a barn culture that is supportive, that is kind, that is competitive, certainly. I mean, she's taken me to the biggest shows of my life. And trained me up to the level where I felt like I could show up and make her proud. Um, but at the same time, you're not competing against your barn mates, you're competing against yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and the horses always come first. So she's very deliberately built a culture in her barn of we are in this together, we are doing this together, we are doing this because we all love horses and we think this is super fun. So let's go have some fun and do good and help each other out. Um, which has made it so much easier to stay in it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just good people. It's people with that same attitude. The people that don't have that, that are more cutthroat or catty, they don't stay. They don't tend to stick around for one reason or another. They might show up, they don't stay very long because there's no room for that. No one else sinks to that level. But that's been a very deliberate cultivation by my trainer over the years. And so even people that have left the barn because they've moved away or for whatever reason, we're still in touch. We still have great relationships. They still have great relationships with my trainer because like it's good juju. We call it the Clairvaux juju. It's good juju.
I love that. That's incredible.
Yeah. I've been very, very fortunate in that sense. I stumbled into it and thank God I did.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Do you want to mention where people can find you if they're interested in kind of following more of your horse lifestyle?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram at Hello My Livia. I will admit I am not super active on there these days just because I don't see my horse very often. But you can follow me there. I also have a blog that I post on from time to time, hellomylivia.wordpress.com. You can also find that linked in my Instagram. Um, but yeah, you can always ping me on Instagram. I love chatting with people. I love meeting people. I'm an extrovert, so I like making friends. So yeah, reach out anytime, and I'd love to meet some people.
Awesome. So good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
You loved that interview as much as I did. There was just some really great tidbits in there, and it really gave me the inspiration I needed to keep going back when we did the interview several months ago, as well as now in this moment where I'm recovering from this fall. And I'm actually solo parenting this week because my partner is out of town all week. So I'm a little sore and trying to be a mom and a horsewoman and all the things by myself. So I really needed that little encouragement this week. So thank you again, Olivia. That was really amazing. If you enjoyed this interview, I would hope that you would please like, subscribe, and share this interview with anybody that you think might also benefit. Um, this is just such important stuff that we need to just keep sharing. So, anyway, I will see you in the next video.